everybody. This is really, truly great to see some people in the room here already with us, obviously discussing Excel and the latest AI features with Excel as well. I'm joining you from British Columbia in Canada this morning. Why don't we take just a couple of minutes here while we're waiting for people to filter in? Why don't you type in the chat box where you're from? Would like to know where you guys are dialing in from. Perfect to see a number of people coming in here. Egypt, London, NYC, Florida, India, Las Vegas, UAE. Nice. North Texas, Latvia. Great. Lagos, Nigeria, Dallas, Texas. That's great. See a couple of people still just give it a couple of seconds more here. Buffalo, welcome. Everybody, well, great. Why would you be listening to us today? Just by way of introduction, my name is Jaco Skuman. I'm the Associate Director of Strategic Finance here at Drivetrain. You could think of Drivetrain as Excel's smarter cousin. We turn your static sheets into live automated business models. We help your FP&A teams to report, plan, and forecast, minus the copy and paste chaos as well. Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to Christian Wattig this morning. Christian is an FP&A expert with over 14 years of experience in multinational corporations like P&G and Unilever, and high growth tech startups like Squarespace. Now, after earning his MBA from NYU Stern, he helped take Squarespace public. Now an entrepreneur, Christian directs the FP&A Certificate Program at Wharton and runs his own firm, InsideFP&A.com, offering corporate training, online programs, and sharing insights through LinkedIn newsletters and his FP&A Tuesday series. Christian, welcome. It's great having you.
Thanks so much for having me today, Jaco. Excited to be here.
That's so good. All right. So what are we going to be discussing today? We're going to be learning a bit more about generating financial models using Excel's agent mode, building forecasts in minutes by combining ChatGPT, Python, and Excel, and also the limitations of LLMs and how to address them. So, Christian, I'm going to hand the presentation over here to you. We are grateful that you're joining us and happy to learn from you today.
Fantastic. All right, so you should see the screen again. I'm really excited to dive into some more advanced AI use cases in finance. Before I do that, I would like to welcome everyone and additionally welcome the CPAs we have in the audience today. If you're practicing CPA based in the US and you would like to earn a free CPE credit for the session, then please be advised that you need to participate in 3 out of the 4 polls that we'll launch over the next 15 minutes. And those will be very simple quiz questions. You don't need to answer it correctly. You just need to participate in the poll so we can use that as evidence with NASBA that you attended this session live and you can earn your CPE credit. All right, with that out of the way, oh, and one other thing, please don't hesitate to put in your questions into the Q&A box. We will answer them at the end, so stay tuned. So let me pick you up at the beginning. FP&A is changing, right? When I train corporate finance teams, I often still see that they're dealing with reconciliations between different systems, formatting data, removing duplicates, copy pasting between different spreadsheets or from one system to another, dealing with exceptions, creating standard reports. So those are your, P&L, balance sheet, cash flow statements, and other metrics that you report in the exact same way every month. And then also writing repetitive variance analysis commentary that kind of sounds the same every month is still very much commonplace. And I'm convinced that all of this will be gone in a few years' time, probably in as short as, and some companies, are farther advanced here. They're using AI already to do some of this, and you'll learn today how that's possible. But in 2, maybe 3, maybe 5 years' time, I'm sure that all of this will be gone. And then the question comes up, of course, what will finance focus on once all these manual tasks are automated? What do you think? So I want this to be a bit of an interactive workshop today. So find the chat in the Zoom settings below and type in, what will finance focus on once all manual tasks are automated? What do you think? What will finance focus on once all manual tasks are automated? What are your thoughts on this? Okay, I see the first responses come through. See a lot of business partnering, analysis, strategic decision-making, real-time forecast updates, focus on analysis and business partnering. The golf game, yeah, right, Justin. Adding value through commentaries, predictive analytics, decision-making, exclamation mark. Yeah, about this budget versus actuals, agent orchestration, right? Someone has to manage not just the people, but also the different AI agents in the future. Yeah, right. So that what I see most mentioned here is business partnering. And yeah, actually, I ran a survey with finance leaders a little while back, and then one reason that people told me that holds them back from working more with cross-functional leaders across the company is that they don't have the time, right? And so I really think that AI will make a big difference there. So I think you mentioned most of that. I'll actually launch the first poll here that's related to that. We won't discuss it because really the purpose is for those of you who would like to earn the CPE credit to show that you're participating. So I'm launching the poll now. I'll close it in a minute or two, but it's for our CPAs out there. So what will we focus on? In-depth analysis, right? Peeling the onions, asking why questions, not just to the data, but also to the business partners, right? About why there is a variance between your actual results and your expectations, whether those expectations are expressed in form of a budget, a latest forecast, or a prior year number. And it means, you keep asking why questions until you get to the so what, right? What that metric, what that difference means for the company. It's about advising cross-functional business partners, helping them figure out what they should be doing, giving them metrics earlier than you currently are so they can make decisions faster, become more effective at what they do. And that requires time because you need to build a deep business understanding. You need to really step out of your finance shoes and be able to step into the shoes of a product manager, of an engineering manager, of a marketing manager, sales, and understand how you can help them. But sometimes how we add value in a company is not just helping other leaders make better decisions, but also challenging the assumptions, right? Challenging how we are approaching things, helping people think outside the box by asking the right questions at the right time, and that's a deeply human task, if you will, right? I think that's one of the tasks that it will take a long time for AI to automate because AI really is an assistant, right? It helps you by answering your questions, but it's not a good challenger, definitely not. And then connecting strategies with tactics, action plans, and measurements. So looking beyond the obvious, using your creativity and looking outside of where you usually look, outside of the currently available data, right? AI is only as good as the data it's being fed with. And so a crucial part of how we're adding value in the age of AI in finance and FP&A is looking at maybe data sets you didn't look at. Maybe insights that could be hidden in your contracts or insights that could be hidden in the HR data set or even in news, etc., that you wouldn't look at otherwise and that aren't necessarily connected to what AI has access to. Okay, so I close the poll. What do we really mean when we talk about artificial intelligence? Let's take a step back before we go deep into the prompts and all that. So artificial intelligence in a nutshell means that we try to mimic human cognition. That's really all it is. But in the finance realm, there are two specific executions of AI that make a big difference, and it's machine learning and generative AI. So we spent the majority of the session today to talk about generative AI, of course, but I don't want to, just completely skip over machine learning. And that's because machine learning is a much older technology. It's more mature than generative AI. And it actually has been around for well over a decade. It was about 8 years ago when I led an FP&A team at Unilever, and it was my task to implement the first machine learning model for Unilever North America. We used it to forecast our working capital. And so this technology is pretty developed. What it does is machine learning takes your actual results and then identifies trends and can remove one-offs. And then it uses that to make predictions about the future. It's fantastic for forecasting because it has a lot of the opposite limitations and advantages than other forecasting methods. So for example, if you have a judgmental based forecast, then there are human biases that play a role. It's a disadvantage. But the advantage of a human-driven, expert-based forecast is that you take nuances and context into account. Machine learning-based forecasts are almost kind of the opposite, because there are no human biases, but it can only take the data it has and do the projection based on that data. So if there are data quality issues, or there are large one-offs in recent data, large inaccuracies in recent data, they get amplified. So there's bias introduced through the data. But because the biases are so different and there's almost opposite in nature, combining expert judgment-based forecasts and machine learning-based forecasts can be extremely powerful. And I would definitely encourage you to take a look at that. In the past, if you wanted to do machine learning, you had to basically get a data science team, which is very costly. But these days, you can go with a third party, which can be a lot more cost effective, or you can even find software solutions that have machine learning already built in. So there's a lot more you can do with machine learning. Just keep in mind that when you are experimenting with that, keep in mind that it's a black box, meaning even the data scientists sometimes don't know why the machine learning model outputs the things it projects, because the algorithms are very, very complex. And so you have to know that it's all about the inputs you're feeding it with. Experiment with different data sets. For example, when I was at a website builder company, a software company during the pandemic, we were using machine learning based models, but it stopped working all of a sudden in mid to late 2020. And it was only when we started to feed it with different data sets that helped us understand the impact of the pandemic better, things like economic data, unemployment data, data related to shutdowns, etc. Once we fed the model with that, forecast accuracy improved significantly. And that just makes machine learning so interesting to me, is that it's all about experimentation, all about trying different inputs. And you can make it a lot more complex than any Excel-based method. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like about machine learning. If you haven't tried it yet at your company, I would definitely give it a shot. And you will actually see that with tools like ChatGPT, it's already possible to do a lot of that, even just with ChatGPT. And I'll show you later how to build a very simple machine learning-based model with ChatGPT. Now, that's a good segue to generative AI, because I'm sure all of you are familiar. That's your ChatGPT, your Gemini, your Claude, and there are a number of other models as well. A lot happening in that space, a lot of money being poured into those AI companies because everyone is racing to build the most effective tool. But at the same time, when I train finance teams and I do corporate workshops and full-day corporate trainings and we cover AI, I often find that people still struggle with how to use it and how to get most out of it. Now I find that most companies now actually give their employees access to AI, but it's underutilized. And I see that often people, it's because people struggle a bit with coming up with use cases, how to use it. And so I hope that after this webinar today, you have a lot of good ideas and a lot of excitement around what you can actually do with that. Let's start at the beginning here. And before I actually go into the different great ways and how you can use AI, I would like to talk briefly about the dangers, right? I definitely, we need to talk about that first. And actually, I want to ask you, what would you say are the dangers of using generative AI? What are the dangers of using generative AI so far? Okay, I see a lot of hallucination in the chat. Confidentiality issues, bad data, private data could be exposed, data confidentiality, losing a bit ability for critical thinking. Yeah, actually, there was a study very recently that showed the more people rely on AI, the less brain activity is going on. So I think how you can really differentiate yourself in the job in the future is still do that deep thinking in addition to using AI. Over-reliance on the output, security issues. Yeah, so the number one danger, if you will, is that around data security. But fortunately, we are now at a place where this tool has been around for 3-4 years, and all of the major AI model companies developed ways in how you can use those tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and others safely at your company. You just need to make sure to triple check with your manager, with your IT team before you're uploading anything confidential to make sure you are allowed to do that and it's ring-fenced. Because you can set up these tools in a way that you can upload most confidential information and it stays on local premises, it doesn't go in the cloud, it doesn't get used to train the model, but you need to triple check that's actually the case. The second one is hallucinations. So when it comes to hallucinations, what's good to know is that that's of course a problem that the builders of AI are aware. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term, hallucination means that the model is making things up, right? It even goes as far as there was an attorney in the US who lost his job, who got disbarred because he used AI output, submitted it to the court as evidence, and he cited court orders there about trials that didn't even exist. And the model even gave links and stuff that the attorney didn't bother to click on. And, so that's what you need to be aware of. There are a few things that you can work around hallucinations though. The first one is try to use reasoning models. So there are models that think slower, where you need to wait longer for the answer. And they have built-in checks to kind of eliminate hallucinations to an extent. It's not the majority, but it gets reduced. And the other way you can work around hallucinations is in focus on, first of all, ask for references, ask for links, and then you always have to click on the link because sometimes the link looks real, but when you click on it, you realize it's not. But then the third way you can deal with hallucinations is using it for tasks where it doesn't matter when it hallucinates. And I'll give you a few examples of what those are later. The third issue that I think actually nobody mentioned here is that it's not very good at math, right? It's getting better there as well, but the AI models, they often struggle with simple math. The classic case was, can you count how many R's are in the word strawberry? And it kept saying there are just 2 R's and repeatedly couldn't even count that there were 3 R's. Strawberry, failed at simple math. There are also ways around that. For example, using Python. So having the AI give you Python code and then using that in Excel. And then it has, fantastic math skill because Python is fantastic to do math. And I'll also show you how that works in a moment. But before we go there, how do you use AI in your day-to-day private life? I always love to ask this question when I teach AI because oftentimes, sometimes I find people have fantastic ideas on how they can do more with AI. And it's always, inspiring to see how other people use it. So how do you use AI in your day-to-day private life? Paul says wedding speech. Yeah. It's essentially that scary part of staring at a blank sheet and knowing, okay, I have to write an entire wedding speech and give it in front of 100 people, right? It gets you over that empty space piece. Meal prep, party ideas, recommended hikes, retirement planning, calorie counting, review commentary to get opinion on different issues, workout planning, scheduling, writing, card letters. Yeah, love it for travel recommendations as well. Understanding Excel formula and file logic. Yeah, now we're getting more into the work part. So I see that you're using it for lots of interesting stuff for your day-to-day life already. Let's take a look at how do you use it actually at work. How do you use generative AI at work? Reviewing memos. Thank you, Michelle. Advanced functions in Excel or PowerPoint. Yeah, we'll take a look at that in a moment as well. Project planning, commentary, variance analysis. Yeah. Analysis, summarizing contracts. Talking to it about contracts, meeting minutes, first drafts of comms. Yeah, you mentioned a lot already. Now we also have our second poll. So I will relaunch the poll again. This is really primarily for our practicing CPAs in the US who need to prove that they are attending this live to NASBA. So that's what I'm including here. And then, so let's talk about a few use cases. You mentioned most of them, but I think there are one or two that you didn't mention. Emails, right? So the way I like to use it for emails is I actually write it really quickly myself first. Then I paste it into AI and I say, hey, I wrote this email. This is the purpose of the email. This is the subject line. Can you help me clean it up? Can you help me, make sure the grammar, the tone is good? Would you add anything, right? Is there anything I should be saying in this email to make it more clear, to make it more concise that I'm not saying? So I much rather use it that way, where I copy it into AI, my first draft, rather than having it write the first draft, because I find that then often there's just too much I have to do in terms of adjustments if I just have it created from scratch. Excel, right? I love it for Excel. It's such a good Excel teacher, which is also why I'm happy that I built my business around teaching what you do outside of Excel to succeed in FP&A, right? But it's fantastic at helping explaining formulas, helping you build models. We'll do that in a moment. It's fantastic to help you explain tools, right? Let's say you use SAP as your ERP system. It can help you navigate that, can help you with using, most commonly used tools. Sometimes it's a bit behind on software updates, but I find that with some back and forth prompting, it's fantastic in helping you navigate things. And I actually think that, in the very near future, all software tools will have AI built in so that there's basically zero learning curve, which I'm definitely looking forward to. And then there's Python and SQL. So Python is great to do advanced analysis, even forecasting and modeling. I'll show you that later. There is SQL, which is a way of how you can slice and dice your data, and you can get insights from a big data set quickly. And in the past, you had to painstakingly learn those techniques. And now, you can just go and have ChatGPT essentially write those prompts for you. Oops, sorry. And then lastly, we have brainstorming. I love to use it for brainstorming, and I'll show you an example for that as well. But when we look at these use cases, the challenge is that AI doesn't have your business context, right? It can give you sometimes generic insights that without context, it's difficult. So Yako, actually, can Drivetrain help overcome this limitation of a lack of context?
Oh, yes, absolutely we can. We recently launched a Drivetrain MCP server that would do exactly what we are going to look at here. So what I've done is I've connected Claude to my Drivetrain account. As you can see, Drivetrain is already logged in here. Now, LLMs are very powerful, but yielding their true power means that you need to upload your data manually, which is really time consuming, and it can also be risky, right? So without your data, your actual data, I should rather say, it's really hard to get non-generic advice. So to bridge that gap between AI and your data, we launched this MCP server, and it basically ensures that when you ask Claude some questions, that it will generate responses that is grounded in your actual data. So let's have a quick look at that. For example, I can ask Claude, what's my revenue per FTE? Now, what's happening right here is that Claude is interpreting my requests, and it's going to go and fetch a metric. Now, if it can't find that metric inside of Drivetrain, it's actually going to pull revenue, and it's going to pull headcount separately, and it will calculate that metric for me as well. Now, also the most important thing here inside the Drivetrain MCP server is that if you don't have security permissions set up that actually lets you view that information inside of Drivetrain, you won't be able to see that in Claude as well. So let's just scroll down here. Our most recent April 2025 is almost 170,000. It gives me a bit of a recent trend here as well. Now, in the interest of time, I've already run some other prompts that is expanding on this one. So let me maybe just show that to you as well. I went and I said, well, how does this compare to industry benchmarks for companies by similar revenue range? And I want this presented as a table. So what it went into the internet and it automatically searched and consolidated industry data. It filtered out benchmarks for my relevant company size. And it actually gave me a very good feedback in a table format here. I would say mostly like to what you would get from a senior analyst. I also then asked a couple of follow-up questions here. How can I improve my revenue by FTE? And Claude searched the web and basically curated a playbook based on the best practices, benchmarks, and my current data, and also outlined some quick wins for us here. So you can see in a couple of minutes, I went from a data point to a full-on strategy. And that is how we view the power of AI in Drivetrain.
Thanks so much for giving that quick demo. That was really cool to see. So let me share my screen again here, because now we're going into the thicker things. Now we actually look at how to do this with ChatGPT, etc. But before we dive into some advanced use cases, I really quickly want to pick you up and look at how do you structure your prompts, right? Because this is crucial. It's garbage in, garbage out. You need to write your prompts the right way. And I will run our third poll here. Why I explain that? Again, this is primarily for our practicing CPAs in the US. So my favorite prompting framework is this one here. This prompting framework was shared by Greg Brockman. He's the co-founder of OpenAI and the current president of OpenAI, the company who makes ChatGPT. And I feel like if there's someone who knows how to prompt these models, it's probably, Greg Brockman is definitely one of them. And so he recommends to share your prompts by saying goal, return format, warnings, and then he does a context prompt, which is really cool. So I won't read through the entire prompt here in the interest of time, but it's about clearly specifying your goal format, then explaining how you want AI to return the prompt, some warnings, be careful to make sure the trail is correct, that it actually exists, that the time is correct. And then he goes into explaining some context. And this is actually where I see a lot of prompts when I train finance teams, where I see a lot of people fall short is on the context. Because a great way to think about it is think about AI as a very well-read intern, right? They've read the entirety of the internet, but they know nothing about your business, about what you really need. And so this is how you do it, is you actually put in a context dump so the model has something it can work with. So let's dive into a few use cases here. And the first thing I want to show you is actually agent mode. So for those of you who aren't familiar with agent mode in Copilot, agent mode in Copilot was released in a test version just a few months ago. Just a few weeks ago. It's very recent. And the way this works, so I have the Excel version of the online version here. You need to have the Microsoft 365 subscription or the paid Copilot subscription to have access to this. And then you can go to add-ins and click on Excel Labs. That's the experimental feature. I'm sure it will soon come to Excel on the desktop soon, but they're still working on it. And then this agent mode is actually quite powerful when it comes to building models from scratch. So I will run a prompt now. Paste the prompt here. So this prompt is create a 3-year P&L model based on the following assumptions for a new product launch. Then imagine you're sitting in a meeting, just taking those quick notes. Okay, target price of the product is $500. About 14% of the selling price is your cost of goods sold. You have some marketing spend, some sales goals in units, some headcount, some costs associated, G&A overhead, 5% of revenue. And then I'll submit it. And it will take about 5 minutes. I'll do something else before we come back here and take a look at that. And I'll also just warn you ahead of time, sometimes it doesn't work, right? It's cutting edge technology. It's very early days still. And this may or may not work, but we're doing this live. So let's take a chance at it. So agent mode is thinking now. Last time it took about 5 minutes. So we'll let it think. It starts reasoning. It starts planning the model. And while it does that, I would like to show you how you can use AI to help you with Excel modeling and doing some really interesting stuff in Excel. So what you see here on the screen is a weekly pacing model. So essentially what that does is it tries to answer the question of how are we doing this month versus our monthly target, and are we on track to hit our monthly goal or are we behind? The way companies would do this is once a week they meet, finance shares a tracker where they show how much of our revenue and our expenses have already come in, right? Have we already realized? And how does that compare to how much time has passed, right? So we are now in the middle of October, essentially, almost 50% done of October. If you have only realized 20% of your sales goals so far, you may be in trouble, right? You may have to pick it up, do something about it, make some decisions. And this is where this model comes in. So we have revenue by month here. Those are our targets, essentially, our monthly forecast, our monthly budget. Then we have some daily actuals. So you have, the first of the month, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. You have some daily actuals here. And now what we're trying to do is build a weekly pacing model here that is dynamic so that there is a date here. And when I change the date in this cell, it should automatically calculate according to how many days of actuals we have. And then I also want this cell to calculate what's the percentage of how much time has already passed in a given month. And again, I want this to be dynamic, so the model needs to be smart enough to recognize whether the day has 31, 30, or even 28 days. So let's see if we can use AI to help us. Let me show you how I would structure this prompt. I'm a finance manager at a software company. I need to build a weekly pacing report in Excel. The model should help us analyze how actual results are tracking against our monthly forecast. I need your help with writing the Excel formulas. So that's the goal. Then we have a return format, please provide formulas I can paste directly into Excel with short explanations of how each component of the formulas work. And then we have some warnings. Ensure that the formulas used are as simple as possible, making them easier to audit and verify that they exactly fulfill the intended purpose. And finally, I have some context. This is a high visibility project that was given to me, and I would like to impress our CFO. I don't work with them often, and I want this model to help them differentiate myself from others. Okay? So that's the prompting format. And then we need to be very specific. And that's where I often see finance teams fall short. So I explain what's going on here. I'm not even uploading the model, by the way. So this is to show that you can do this even if you don't have a secure version of ChatGPT where you can upload confidential data. So I don't want to upload this. And I say, I have actual revenue by day in row 22, associated dates in row 20, and I explain a bit more of how the Excel file is structured. So let's submit that and see what we get. Again, the goal here is to get a formula that I can paste into Excel. And this, while this is thinking, so this is one of those use cases where it doesn't matter if it hallucinates. Because what may happen here is that I paste the formula into Excel and it doesn't work. But there is no issue there, right? There's nothing happening. We're not dealing with any facts. And then if that happens, let's see what happens. But if that happens, then I can just give it feedback and say, actually, the formula you gave me didn't work. This is what the result I got. Can you try again? And then you will find that you can work with these models and have them be very useful, even though sometimes they hallucinate. Okay, so it gives me a SUMIF formula with an interesting smaller equal sign. Let's see what happens if I paste that straight into the Excel file, into the weekly pacing model. Here it is. So we will paste it here. Okay, I like where this is going. 47,498. Let's see if that's correct. If we sum up all the revenue, 47,498. Yeah. So you can also click in here and you can see, okay, it's picking up the cell, it's picking up that. Let's see what happens if we change this. So if we change this to 1,1, for example, yep, you can see it's dynamic and it gives you, the right formula. So this is a way in how you can have this AI essentially teach you Excel. Let's also do this formula though, because this one is actually fairly tricky. So let's go back to our chatbot. And by the way, it's also kind enough to explain how this works. So if you're using it that way, I would encourage you to not just take the formula and run, but basically slow down, see how it did this, and so you can learn something around how this works. But let's see what happens if it can also help us with doing that tricky formula for how much of the time has passed, because that's definitely a tricky one. Thinking. And then when it's done, when we're done with this, we'll take a look back at agent mode in Copilot to see how that's doing. But let's see if it can give us the formula for how much time has passed in a month until a certain date. Oh, I actually don't like this because this is a very long formula. But let's see how it works. Let's see how it works. While we paste that is, I'll say that's, whoops, sorry. That's a long formula. Can you make it simpler? So, but let's see what happens if we post this in our file. Maybe it works, but I do think that there's an easier way to do this. Okay, 3%, that actually doesn't look too bad. What happens if we go to, okay, so 15, let's just do a check, 15 divided by 31. So it is correct, but that's a case where I would go back to the model and say, hey, can you give me a simpler way of doing this? Okay, so this already looks better here. Okay, so let's take a look at how agent mode is doing. Oh, it did something here. So let's see what it did. So again, the task was to create a 3-year P&L model based on these assumptions, and then said, okay, it reasoned for 64 seconds. Actually, that's pretty fast. Let's see how it did here. It calculated the revenue, gross margin. It said, okay, it built these assumptions. But let's take a look at what we have here. So we have a summary that links to B8. We can't see B8 because it put this over here. Okay, so it has the assumptions listed here. Do these assumptions line up? It looks like they line up. And then it has the formulas linked. So it links to cell B8 here, which actually is what we want. And then if we look here, it looks like everything is dynamic. So we don't see anything hard-coded, which is actually pretty cool. It has the revenue, the operating income, and it even created a chart here. So I think at the first glance, it did a good job. Now, before I use this for anything, I would, of course, do my due diligence. I would check the cells. I would go through everything. Essentially the same way you're going through an Excel model that your analyst has built, right? If you're a manager, your analyst submits a model to you. You want to make sure that you review it, that you check it before you submit it. And so you definitely have to do that because it can make mistakes. But I find that it's pretty impressive that you can just from a little bit of, from one prompt, it builds a fully dynamic model for you that's at the very least a great starting point and saves you some time. And this will only get better from here. So definitely keep an eye out on Copilot. And then the next thing I would like to show you is a way to do, as I mentioned before, machine learning based forecasting with ChatGPT and Python. Now I'll tell you ahead of time that this is a fairly advanced use case. I'll talk more about it in a second. Let me first show you what we're trying to achieve here. So we have a data set. This data set has, just a moment, this data set, where is it? Here. So this is our data set. We have monthly data for the last 8 years. We have some retail deposits here. So imagine this is a bank that uses that. And then we have this actual data, and it ends in April of 2025. I can zoom in a bit. And I want then the model to forecast the rest of 2025. So in this case, May throughout December. And I would not just do a simple forecast. I would like it to use an ARIMA model. So for those of you who are not familiar, ARIMA is a fairly sophisticated algorithm. It stands for Auto-Regressive Integrated Moving Averages. And it's an algorithm that takes seasonality into account, and it can also learn from its own mistakes. But I'm not letting ChatGPT do the math, right? Because it's not that good at math. I'll ask it to write a Python code, which I will then insert into Excel. It's also a new feature that Microsoft released a few months ago. So I say, write the Python codes, give me confidence intervals, so we don't just have a point forecast, but a range of likely outcomes, then double check it runs. So I will execute this now. Here it shows me that it actually read the file correctly, and then it's thinking. So while it's thinking, I'll give you a warning that in my testing, this didn't always work perfectly right out of the gate, because it's a fairly advanced use case, right? We want to use it for forecasting, for using ARIMA, which is a fairly complex algorithm. And so I had to, in the past, when I tested this, go back to it and say, oh, actually, this doesn't quite work. Can you try again? Because I had this specific error. But let's see what it does. While it's thinking, I actually want to show you how the Python integration works. So we're back at our data set here. If you go to formulas and you are on the latest version of Excel, you will have this Insert Python button. That's what we'll do in a moment when ChatGPT gives us the code. So this is your Python window. Let me see how ChatGPT is doing. It's still thinking. Okay, fantastic. It has something. It fits a small Sarima model. Okay, so now I'm not a developer. I can't tell whether this code works or not, but that's okay because we can take it and we can copy it. Now, quick word of warning. because we're copy pasting code into Excel, it is helpful to scan it, to maybe run it through another prompt to explain to you what it actually does from a security point of view. I will go here and insert it. And again, always check with your IT team, with your manager before you use this with your company data. But I'm actually not uploading anything to ChatGPT. I'm taking the code that ChatGPT has generated, and then I will execute it. Now it's running inside of Excel. This is not using Copilot. It's not using any AI really. It's just using Excel's built-in function to process Python code. And this should be fairly quickly. Then we'll see either it will give us an error message if it didn't quite work, or it will give us a forecast. Still saying it's busy, which is good. Here on the right side, you can see some other examples of what you can do with Python. It's taking a little bit longer than it did in my testing, but let's see where this ends up. Take a quick look at the code. This doesn't look too bad. Let's run it again. Let's see what happens if we run it again, because sometimes it gets stuck. We will go again to Python, copy the code from ChatGPT. Where do we have it? Here we have it. Copy the code from ChatGPT. Execute, and then let's see. While this is running, I'm going to see if I can answer some questions I have in the chat. So Tisha's asked, let's say AI handles repetitive tasks for the organization, then on what should FP&A professionals focus on instead? Is it judgment only? Yeah, so the repetitive tasks are done by AI, but I would argue that these tasks are less fun anyway, right? Because you're being paid essentially to help leaders make better decisions, and you can arguably do that better through business partnering, through deep analysis. So that's what you will focus on when the repetitive tasks are gone. Let's see if we can answer another question. How can I best use Excel Copilot if I don't have the enterprise access? So you can use, so Excel Copilot is essentially a version of ChatGPT, or it uses an older version of ChatGPT usually. We don't have full transparency of which model it uses, but you can use it the same way I showed before for brainstorming, for helping you with Excel formulas. Just don't upload anything confidential, of course. Don't have the enterprise access. So as I mentioned, sometimes this doesn't work. Going back to this, to the prompt here. So now I would give it feedback and say it doesn't calculate. It remains busy in the Python cell in Excel. Let's see if it can say something. Maybe it will come back and say, actually, there's a way to make this simpler, to use less load on Excel, because maybe the code that it wrote is too difficult to execute. Let's see if it gives us a better prompt here. And while it's thinking, let me see if I can answer another question. John asks, what happens when AI makes a mistake in the forecast? How do you catch and fix it? Fantastic question. That's actually the next thing I wanted to talk about. Let's quickly copy paste this over here. So ChatGPT gave me a new code. I will grab the code and paste it into Excel, into the Python, and see if it works now. And if this doesn't work, that's fine, but I can still talk about how you can catch mistakes in the forecast. So this has worked in testing. If we don't have the time to do it now, what I would do is I would go back. So now it actually gave me an error message, which is good. It says that there's an attribution error. And so I would go back to ChatGPT and just tell it that error. And then there may be some back and forth. In my testing, usually after the second or third try, it gives you a forecast. Now, to John's question, how do you know whether this is a good forecast, right? So let's say it gives us numbers here for the period of May through December. In that case, how do you know it's a good forecast? And the way to do this is through what's called backtesting. So what I would do is I would go in and I would say, okay, let's actually delete May through April 2024 to 25. So these are dates where I already have actual costs. I would start a new chat, a temporary chat, so it doesn't have the history. I would upload this and I would run it again and I would say, hey, forecast May through December of 2024. Then it gives you that forecast and you can immediately compare it to the metrics you already have here and see how accurate was it. And do you have to go to the 85% range or the 95% range? And that's a way how you can get it immediately. I found that when I tested it with this data series before, and it actually gave me a code that worked. Let's take a look back at this again and see if we can get it to work. Then the forecast accuracy was very good. I was surprised at how good it is. Now, your mileage varies according to the data set that you're feeding with. If it's highly irregular, if there's a lot going on there, then it won't work. So we see that it's given me another error here. And so I would just go back and forth, give it that error, and then see what it does. Now, the good news is that it's a different error than before. So you would give it an error, and then we take it there. Now, in the interest of time, I will not continue troubleshooting this. Just know that in testing, I usually had 2 or 3 back and forth conversations with AI until it gave me that. And this is now also a good segue to talk about the limitations, right? And when it comes to the limitations of AI, you see what we're talking about, what I showed you just now. It doesn't always work right away, but there are other limitations as well. You need to upload data manually, collaboration is not possible, and it doesn't connect your real-time data. So reforecasting can still be quite tedious, even if you get in a machine learning model to work the way I intended to here. And as you start scaling, it can make sense to look at AI native FP&A tools, so that those are tools like Drivetrain where the AI is built in. I actually wanted to see, Jocko, can you actually show that briefly before we wrap up here so people see how these AI can work inside of FP&A tools as well?
Sure. Yes. Thank you for passing that question along here, Christian. Let me share out my screen quick. So Drivetrain was built primarily to streamline your day-to-day tasks in FP&A. Let me show you that quickly for a glimpse here. The biggest time suck normally for FP&A teams is to actually get your data into the system. So whether it's multiple ERPs or multiple entities at different currencies, that's very easy to do in Drivetrain. You can see I have a couple of Xero instances, maybe Google Sheets connected here, Salesforce data. Question is, how do I get those in? We support over 800 custom connectors inside of Drivetrain that we can connect to as well. And once you pick your system, you can set the frequency of data refresh, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. You can also kick that off manually by coming in and selecting your source system that you want to refresh and sync that refresh as well. Let's quickly talk about planning, if you don't mind here. Challenges with planning. Normally, there are 3 core challenges. Real-time data that needs to be up to date for forecasting. We need to require some sort of collaboration with stakeholders to get your data up and running, to get it timely and up to date, normally from like the CMO or head of sales, and then it's also a time-consuming process. But inside of Drivetrain, we have created a Drive app hub, and this basically lets you create base models for things like headcount planning, three-statement models, as well as pipeline movement walks. Now, if we were to look at this, it will actually give you the models for your balance sheet, your cash flows, and your P&Ls, gives you out-of-the-box reporting, as well as taking care of your background data. Now, if we were to launch this, this would then make sure that the model would get populated inside of Drivetrain, utilizing that AI agent right over there. And minutes later, we will see that we have outputs of the three-statement model. Now, again, if I'm just drilling into this model, for example, into my income statement, we can see that we have forecasting information that has already been populated here based on what we have selected out of my instance here, which is NetSuite data. But if I wanted to maybe change, for example, my forecast for sales and marketing from 6 months, maybe down to 3, I can do that very quickly and easily, hitting apply. Or I can maybe say, I want to change this to a data-driven information set, or even a driver-based, where I say, give me an average of 20% across revenue here as well. As easy as this, we can update our forecast. Now, once reforecasting needs to happen, obviously we need updated actuals into the system. So what we would do here is, this is how easy it is. Once books close in your source system, the refresh happen, we can click here, and I'll show you how quick it is to roll a month. Select June, for example, update. We can have our eyes here on this column. This will be actualized by getting little data canisters here, for example. That's how easy this is. Everything from a forecasting perspective, July onwards, still stays intact because we've written our information logic here driven out of a forecast formula as well. Now, let's say, for example, my CMO or my director of sales needed a different scenario case that we need to forecast and plan on. Do we need to create another model? We don't really have to do that. Inside of Drivetrain, we have scenarios built in. So if we were to come and add an aggressive case here, we can do so, create that aggressive case. And by default, I'm still defaulting back to my manual budget version here. I can then go across and select my aggressive case as well. Let me just find that for you here quickly. There you go, aggressive case. And once this is now updated, your visual cue would be that your forecast is now all grayed out. We can then maybe come in and say, well, times 1.2, for example, if you wanted to lift some of this revenue, or we can just change some of our R&D averages here as well. And this is how easy it is to create different scenarios, as well as different versions that you could use to forecast back and give timely insights as a business partner by utilizing Drivetrain. All right, so I believe that it's time for another poll. On screen, you would see that there is one more poll that's launched. I'll give a couple of minutes there just for clarity's sake. And while the poll is running, just wanted to highlight here from our side, these are some of the logo slides or the logos that we'll be working with some of our customers. We're also SOC 1 Type 2 and SOC 2 Type 2 certified. So it's great to kind of just have that to see that we have a global presence as well here with Drivetrain. Drivetrain has simplified by eliminating many of my manual steps involved with maintaining the Excel forecast, and it's made it much easier than Excel. I would now just wanted to point you here. We will be disseminating this deck for you as well as the recording after we conclude here, but there's also some helpful resources. Please go check out Christian's bootcamp, as well as some 14 essentials from ChatGPT prompts for finance and the state of AI in FP&A. Before we close here, Christian, I believe we are slightly over, but maybe we can extend this slightly. If there are some questions that you would that hasn't been answered yet, we just would like to open the floor here to make sure that we can address those for you today as well. Why don't you type that into the chat window for us? All right. Well, I just would like to thank you so much, Christian, for your time today. This was really insightful. We really appreciate the time that you took and the care that you showed through the demo process. I've personally learned a lot. Excel is close to my heart as well. Just a reminder to the audience here, if you would like to get in touch or get a personalized demo, please feel free to scan the QR code. But we want to thank you for joining us today. And Christian, again, thank you for taking the time to take us through Copilot and its AI features.
Thank you, Jaco. Just really quickly before we wrap up, for those of you who are still here, I pasted the third error message into ChatGPT. The new code actually ran well, and it actually ended up working out. So I will just really briefly show you this, how we ended up getting the forecast here. So when this works, you have a data frame cell here, and you can see the forecast if you click on Array Preview, and it will give you the forecast, the lower 80, lower 95. So those ranges where the likely inputs are. And then the next step would be to do that back testing, to run it again without the last year's actuals to see how well it would do, just to quickly round it out. But yeah, to echo what Jaco said, and thanks so much for joining today. Really appreciate the time and the engagement as well. Thanks so much.